I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Are you ready to win at the game of life? Well, throw out that rulebook and get down to the business of being the best and most authentic version of you. Welcome to the Human Design Podcast. We're changing the rules around success, abundance, purpose, love, and life, where we're creating a planet where everyone can thrive in a world that loves and supports each other. I'm your host, Emma Dunwoody, a qualified master coach, human design expert, podcaster, and entrepreneur that is living the life of my dreams, breaking all the rules while doing it, making a huge impact, and living my design and manifesting miracles on the daily. Join me as I break down and simplify everything you need to live in alignment with your human design, teach you how to recondition your unconscious mind for greatness, and to take back your power so you can manifest your heaven on earth and serve the rest of the planet at the same time. It's time to give up the fear and step into your highest potential, to reach for the stars, to know and live your greatness. It's what you deserve, and it's what the planet really needs from you. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Let's talk about the FLFE, or Focused Life Force Energy. I've been in love with this service since 2019, and I attribute a lot of my improved performance in all areas of my life since then to this incredible service. Right after I first put the FLFE on my home, my business took off. And to be honest, my kids actually started getting along better than they had in a really long time. But back to the business. I actually launched my first mastermind the first week of lockdown, with great success when many were struggling. Last year, when I was walking the Camino, I noticed that my body was a lot stronger and fitter, and I'd gone without the joint pain that I'd actually experienced 4 years earlier when I walked it for the first time. And I honestly believe it's being in the FLFE for the last 4 years that's helped my body over that time rest and recover and build muscle and strength. And as I've navigated a number of significant challenges over the last 4 years, like losing both my parents, the end of a 24-year marriage, and building a 7-figure business, I often hear from friends how amazed they are by how quickly I move through challenge, how quickly I get to a place of love, releasing the pain, the trauma, and the conditioning much faster than many, and I know that I get to letting go and love much faster than I used to. The FLFE raises the consciousness of a building or a place or device that it's connected to, meaning that everything and everyone in the vicinity of this higher consciousness field accesses more love, healing, success, and joy than when you were swimming around in the standard collective consciousness. This gives you access to greater inspiration, ideas, thinking, healing, dimensions, grace, and all sorts of good things. To top this all off, the FLFE mitigates EMF. It actually transforms the harmful non-native EMF frequency into good, healing, and protective frequency of shungite. My dog Alice cannot get enough of my phone ever since I switched it on, often sleeping with her head directly on it. Jeffrey and Clayton, the founders and creators of this service, are on a mission to raise consciousness and to get their incredible service to as many people as possible. And so, it is very affordable, and you can try it for free for 2 weeks with no obligation. And if you like it, then you can sign up. Check out the links in the show notes and turn your home and office into a temple. Hey, and welcome to today's episode. Well, far out. Believe it or not, it is that time of the year already where we are planning, that we're thinking about the end of the year, that we're even starting to look towards next year. And as usual, as I have every other year for the last 3, maybe 4 years, I want to help you do the same process that we do in our business. In fact, I'm running an entire class on this, so an hour and a half, 90 minutes worth of what I'm going to give you a brief overview of today on the podcast. That's really going to help you understand how much success you've actually had. Because the human brain it is so good at deleting, distorting, and generalizing information, meaning that unless we take a moment to sit back and review, actually go over what happened throughout the year, most often we will skip over half, 3/4 of the wins that we actually had. And if we don't do this in review, then what happens is that we can feel, maybe that we didn't achieve certain things, or maybe that we didn't have as good a year as we did have. I know for me, my ego loves to just delete information. So, as many of you would have heard me talk about, I actually use a particular diary or calendar called a passion planner. And I love, love, love these things. I'm not an affiliate. I'm not sponsored by them, but I've used them and I give them to my team for years. And the reason why is because not only do I get to use a piece of paper and a pen to record what's going on in a week, because, the more modalities we can use to experience something or learn something, the more it's going to stick. The other thing is it's got a lot of like planning facilities, but also every month you review the month you've had. And before recording this, I went through my passion planner and looked at each monthly review and just realized, like, I knew I'd had a really brilliant year. It shows in our revenue. We've got a huge increase in revenue this year. It shows in my happiness levels. I'm certainly working less and receiving more, which is super exciting. We had a massive win this year because I only ran the one mastermind, and HDX easily not only made up for that revenue, that missed revenue, but way over delivered. So we've had some freaking super exciting wins. However, when I actually go back and look month to month, there were so many little things that I was like, wow, I'd completely forgotten about that. And one of the big things for me was realizing by December, like now, I have normalized so many of the really big things that happened this year, because now I get the most incredible podcast guests on my show, and I get invited onto the most incredible shows. And by now it's almost become like normalized. I actually had this really cool experience a couple of weeks ago where I was going over my calendar for the week, and I said to T, I was being interviewed on this podcast, and I said to her, is this Reverend Michael Beckworth that's interviewing me? And she's like, yep, I think that's his name. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what? Because he's like one of the original teachers that I first kind of learned from back when I think I watched The Secret and he was on there. And then I went down the rabbit hole that was his work, and it so resonated with me. And, he's on Mind Valley. And there was this moment, 2 weeks ago, where I was like, are you kidding me? This is so exciting. Like, this is being interviewed by one of my all-time mentors and heroes. So I've had so many of those moments this year, but, you just forget, especially if you're having a few hiccups, especially if there's been challenges. And yes, there's been challenges for everybody. This has been what I would call a pretty significant growth year, meaning that in my world, what I have witnessed is that there is so much forward momentum. There's really great things happening. And we have had to face, our dragons this year. And in many cases, the ones that we've been ignoring for a long time. So it's been a really, really important growth year as well for all of us. And we do have some cool things. I've got one of my private clients, an HDX member, coming up, who is the most incredible astrologer and human design reader. And she's going to come and do a forecast for us for next year. And I'm going to take you into planning for next year. Before we do that, what I want to do is I want to take you through a bit of an exercise to look at 2024 in review and do what I love to call it is like mine for the diamonds that perhaps you've lost or forgotten. Now, if you were here last year when we were doing these podcasts, then perhaps you wrote yourself a letter. This time last year from your future self, And then, well, now is the time to go back and read it. Now's the time to review it. You know, what is really cool, I went and reviewed mine just before I did this podcast, and I ticked everything off. There was one thing that as yet hasn't come in for 2024, but everything else was like ticked off. And that felt really, really powerful. You know, I think I have over the last couple of years really mastered manifesting. I think manifesting is the thing that, honestly, like, I can manifest things so quickly that sometimes if I'm in an emotional low and latch onto an old pattern and I'm kind of in that, you know, down that rabbit hole, I just realize how quickly that I manifest what I don't want just as much as I manifest what I do want. So, you know, reading over my letter really gave me clarity of what a great manifester I really am. And for those of you that might be listening and going, I thought you were an MG. I am an MG. I meant manifester as in manifester ER, not manifestor as in type OR. So the other thing that's really cool about having this letter that you wrote to yourself last year, which I'll talk to more when we get to planning 2025, but the other thing for me is it really gave me clarity, and I'm a line 3, so sometimes I do need a few goes at it, also being an emotional authority. And I made me realize what I can do less of and what I can do more of, okay? Like how I can get even greater clarity on that letter to me. And as much as that sounds like a mental question, because instantly my ego goes, yeah, we should have been more specific on X or Y or Z. Really, what I mean is one of the greatest lessons I have really embodied this year, especially this last quarter, and I'm really turning the dial up on now, is actually being super connected and aligned to source all the time. You know, we talk a lot about that with human design, surrendering to our design, running the experiment, being in the body. And for me, I've really gone to the next level of really choosing to be in the spiritualist identity, which is something that is still a work in progress. And at the same time, I'm getting a lot of incredible results. So that said, my letter for next year is going to be really focused on this, like diving even deeper into the feeling, like really what is the feeling that I want to feel by December. But we'll get to that. We will get to that. So if you don't already have a piece of paper and a pen, then get it out. Get it out. So we can do a little bit of an exercise. I am actually going to refer just a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm actually saving this for HDX. But I'm going to go into a tiny bit of detail around your design as well, because I think this is a beautiful way to, again, see the evidence, you know, show our brains the proof of what happens when we not only consciously know and understand our design, you know, from the mind, but integrate it into our body and how things can shift and change in our lives, if you're anything like me, pretty quickly. All right, so grab your piece of paper, grab your pen, and maybe if you want to, pause this for a moment, take a few moments to ground yourself, do a meditation, you know, maybe a heart coherence meditation, bring your heart, brain, gut into coherence, whatever works for you. And then I want you to actually check in. And if you were here last year, then you would have picked a word for 2024. My word for 2024 was Wonderland. Wonderland. And interestingly, I went into each area of my life and defined what would Wonderland look like, feel like, be like. And one lesson I've learned, especially the back end of this year, is not to overwork it, not to put too much detail into it, to actually stand back and really embody a feeling, a frequency. Because going into next year, I really want to focus on beyond my wildest dreams. And that is a feeling, and that leaves the door open for the universe to bring us something really spectacular. So anyway, what was your word? Whatever word you had for this year, just ask yourself, how did it manifest? You know, how did it manifest? You know, Wonderland really manifested for me in a lot of travel, a lot of incredible friendships and relationships, a lot of definitely huge healing and breakthrough over my physical body. If you've been here a while, you know that I've been healing, kind of body image stuff, whether it was the menopause stuff or, feeling like I was fat as a child. And, with the separation and being, 49 and kind of back out there in the dating world, this was something that I really needed to look at, address, heal. And I'm really happy to say that I've absolutely done that. So Wonderland, in one area of my life, that Wonderland piece and all the details that I wrote out, like I really nailed it. And what was cool is that I didn't overwork it. I didn't try too hard. And this is an important part. There's a great book called Reality Transurfing, and it talks about not putting too much potential into things. So and I'm using the word overworking it, but not putting too much energy towards things, because then the universe has to balance that energy out. And I feel like this is where I've had this big win with healing all my body image stuff this year and just feeling great in my skin as I turn 50 next year. So just an example, whatever your word was, how is it manifested for you? And you might want to break that down into personal, and then you might want to also break that down into business. Okay. So I know for me, Wonderland in business has really been meeting some of the most incredible people, creating like a Wonderland within HDX, having world-class teachers in there as well as myself. And also this year, business has felt easier than it's ever felt before. There's so much more flow, so much more ease. I've got more time to relax and retreat and have fun. So, that's what Wonderland has really felt, really manifested for me this year. So again, whatever your word is, have a look at that. So if you did write your letter last year, and if you've got it in front of you, I just want you to read over it. I want you to see how that actually turned out for you. Did what your future self told you would happen or who you would be, did that actually manifest? And think about how you felt and how you acted, how you behaved, what you did, who you were being as you move through the year in regards to the things that did manifest, and then in regards to the things that didn't. I think the one thing that hasn't dropped in for me yet, and I do have a feeling that it's still going to drop in by the end of the year, but I think it's probably, or at least I feel, I've put a lot of extra potential behind that. At first it was coming from fear. I kind of wanted it to drop in because I felt like I needed it. And then it's transitioned into a different place now where I just would like to have it, which is, a much more powerful place to be. And at the same time, I've had a lot of intuitive guidance from a lot of intuitive friends that have told me, yeah, it's going to happen around this time. So my mind is way too attached to it. So I think that is also potentially something that's maybe slowed that manifestation down. But what I want you to do is I want you to look back over that letter that you wrote yourself last year and actually have a look what manifested, what didn't, and how it felt to manifest each thing, so that you can get a really clear grasp on, okay, well, this is how manifesting feels for me. This is how it works out. I know for me, the less I do, it's almost like the less detail, the more I just focus on a simple feeling, the easier it is for me to manifest. So I don't know. You run your experiment, see how that works for you. Now, the next question, and obviously press pause if you want to have time with all of these questions. You don't have to rush through it. But what were your biggest challenges of 2023? Like, what are the biggest challenges you experienced in 2023? For me, one of my biggest challenges was actually facing the thing that I was the most afraid of. And that was really standing up for myself and saying what I really thought in regards to, like personal relationships, not business. Like, I'm a freaking, hero in my business. I'm like this confident and powerful, and I'll just, forge whatever path I need to forge. But really this year it was about standing up for myself in, more personal relationships and putting boundaries in place and kind of accepting things that I didn't want to accept, about the past and about what that meant about me. But that challenge in itself has really taught me to slay my last dragon. It's the last big fear that I had. It's not to say that I won't have more fears, but it's the last one that was kind of my elephant in the room, the one I was just ignoring. I just don't want to look at that. So what were your big challenges and how did you deal with them? How did you face them? What actions did you take? Who did you become because of those challenges, which I think is the most important thing? Who do you become, or who did you become by facing these challenges? Because I'm telling you, it's a better version of yourself for sure. The next one I want you to consider, to contemplate, is what were your biggest wins of 2024? What were your biggest wins of 2024? For me in business, as I said earlier, I really wanted to take my foot off my own personal accelerator. I wanted to work less. I love my mastermind. It's so good and it's very intense. It takes a lot of energy from me, or takes a lot of energy for me. So I didn't want to do it a couple of times. And, we might do the same next year. So if you've ever wanted to do the mastermind, make sure you get on it, because this year, may not do too. And one of the big wins for us was HDX, not only picking up the slack financially, but way over delivering on that. So that was super, super exciting. Other big wins were, as I've said, some of the most incredible podcast guests and being interviewed on some of the most incredible podcasts. Another big wins for me personally are the friends that I have in my life. That's been a real game changer, and getting to meet some of the most incredible people on retreat, running 3 very powerful and transformative retreats and getting to travel the world being paid to be me. That's always a massive win. So what were your wins? What were your wins of 2024? Okay. Last but not least, because I do want to keep this kind of simple and straightforward. And if you're an HDX listener, don't worry, there is the expanded version all for you tomorrow in class. But what I would encourage you to do, my listener friend, is review your design. So when did you come to human design? What have you been experimenting this year, or experimenting with this year? What did life look like before you started your, authority experiment? What does life look like after? So really dive into this process, your experiment of human design, and have a look at the different areas, have a play around, really review the truth of how life has improved by integrating all of this information into your life. Because if you consciously go through that process, I think you will be very pleasantly surprised to see how your relationships have improved, how business has improved, how your health and well-being has improved, because you are standing up and being the authority in your own life. You are leading you, which is super, super exciting. And I think one of the fun questions that I am going to give you, friend, is have a look at your incarnation cross. How did your incarnation cross show up in 2024? That's always a fun one. So last but certainly not least is, what are you grateful for? When you look back at 2024, what are you most grateful for? Who are you most grateful for? What events are you most grateful for? Really go through the year with a fine-tooth comb if you can, and drop some beautiful gratitude on everything that has really brought you to this moment in time. Really get clear on who you've become and how you've grown and how life is better. And don't let your ego tell you it's not. Because if you've had a hard year and you perceive you haven't had any wins, then that's total bullshit. Because at the end of the day, you are not the person you were in January of this year. You are a very different and more grown version of you, more equipped for the rest of things that are going to show up in 2025. And you're very much a part of, if you're listening to this, the crew, this group of us that have chosen to be here in this time of transition and to lead the way. So even if you have felt challenged this year, and trust me, I've had amazing wins and I have had very significant challenges, the thing that I want you to know is that they are all working for you. They're all working for you. They're all here to teach you something very specific, something about you that needs to grow, evolve, transform, so that you can step into those dreams that we're going to talk about on another episode of the podcast when we focus on 2025. One thing, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again because it's such a perfect example. One thing I always say to Amanda, who's my PR person, there are very, big names that I want to have on the podcast and that I want to be on their podcast. And sometimes those big names, they're booked in and then they drop off, or we can't get our foot in the door. And every time Amanda will say to me, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I'll be like, there's nothing to be sorry about. I need to grow into the version of me that can be the guest on that podcast, or that can host and give, good questions to that guest. Now, I need to grow into that version of me. And when I do that, well, my success is inevitable. I will be on the podcast, or they will be on mine. I know that for sure. So the good, the bad, and the ugly are all leading you to that place to become the person that can actually receive your dreams, receive your greatest potential. So on that note, I trust you got what you needed from today's episode, and I so look forward to having you on the next one. Bye for now. Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.